The warning lights flashed red across the bridge of the Starweaver, painting everything in an ominous crimson glow. The massive transport vessel drifted through the empty space between stars, its powerful engines now silent and dead. 3 alien engineers huddled around the main control panel, their slender fingers moving frantically over the holographic displays. "The quantum drive is failing," Rose said, her large purple eyes reflecting the emergency lights. Like all members of her species, she had delicate features and silvery skin that sparkled under the ship's lights. Her long fingers, perfect for detailed technical work, trembled slightly as she analyzed the readings. Next to her, Lily's antenna twitched nervously. She came from a low-gravity world, and her tall, willowy frame made her look almost fragile. "The radiation levels are rising. We need to shut down the core before it reaches critical levels." The third engineer, Iris, whose translucent skin showed the gentle flow of blue blood beneath, shook her head. "If we shut it down out here, we'll be stranded for weeks. The backup systems can't handle a jump of this distance." The Starweaver was carrying precious cargo, medical supplies for a colony world. Delay wasn't just inconvenient, it could cost lives. The 3 engineers had graduated top of their class from the Galactic Engineering Academy, but right now, all their advanced knowledge seemed useless. "What about that maintenance vessel we passed an hour ago?" Lily suggested, her voice carrying a hint of desperation. "They might have spare parts." Rose pulled up the communication logs. "The JSS Groundbreaker, it's a human vessel." She said the word human with a mixture of fear and uncertainty. The 3 engineers exchanged worried looks. Humans were known throughout the galaxy as Deathworlders, creatures who evolved on a planet that should have killed them. High gravity, deadly radiation, extreme temperatures, aggressive predators. Earth had it all. It had produced a species that most of the galaxy found terrifying. "They have a repair specialist aboard," Iris read from the screen. "Someone named Jack." The ship's computer chimed in with another warning. The radiation levels were climbing faster now. In their specialized environmental suits, the 3 engineers could handle normal repair work, but this was different. The radiation leaking from the quantum drive would kill them in minutes, even with protection. "We don't have a choice," Rose decided. "Send the distress call." The response came faster than they expected. A gruff but professional voice answered their call. JSS Groundbreaker responding. "This is Jack. What's your situation?" As Rose explained their problem, she noticed something odd. The human didn't seem concerned. He asked clear, technical questions about their quantum drive model, the radiation levels, and their cargo. "I can be there in 20 minutes, Jack said. "Have your docking bay ready." "But the radiation," Lily started to warn him. "Won't be a problem," Jack interrupted. "I've handled worse in the shipyards back home. Just make sure you have your technical specs ready for me to review." After the communication ended, the 3 engineers looked at each other in disbelief. Their species had evolved on worlds with minimal radiation. Their bodies were built for precision and intelligence, not surviving harsh conditions. The idea of someone casually offering to work in an environment that would kill them seemed impossible. "Did you know," Iris said, checking the ship's database, "that humans evolved on a planet that bathes them in radiation every day? They call it sunlight. Their bodies can even repair some radiation damage naturally." "That's terrifying," Lily whispered. Rose watched the maintenance vessel approach on their screens. It was smaller than the Starweaver, built for function rather than comfort. As it grew closer, she couldn't help but wonder what other surprises this human would bring. The ship's computer announced another warning about the quantum drive. They had maybe 2 hours before total failure. Rose took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Soon, they would meet their first human, and everything they thought they knew about engineering would change forever. The docking bay doors opened with a soft hiss. Rose, Lily, and Iris stood nervously as they waited for their first glimpse of the human engineer. They had seen pictures of humans before, but meeting one in person was different. especially in these circumstances. The airlock cycled, and Jack stepped through. The three aliens instinctively took a step back. He wore a heavy-duty EVA suit that made him look like a walking tank. Unlike their sleek, lightweight environmental suits, his was built for extreme conditions. It was scratched and marked from heavy use, telling the story of countless repairs in harsh conditions. When Jack removed his helmet, they saw a face that surprised them. Instead of the fierce creature they expected, they found a calm, professional-looking human with short brown hair and alert eyes. He wasn't particularly tall by human standards, but his strong build spoke of a life spent working in high gravity. "Engineering room?" he asked simply, carrying a large toolkit that would have been too heavy for any of the aliens to lift. "This way," Rose said, leading the group through the corridors. She noticed how confidently he walked, completely comfortable in the ship's artificial gravity that many visitors found challenging to adjust to. In the engineering room, the radiation warnings were even more intense. Red warning symbols floated in the air, projected by the ship's safety systems. Jack walked straight to the quantum drive's control panel, ignoring the warnings that would have sent most species running in terror. "Your quantum drive is an older model," he said, studying the readouts. "These things are built solid, but they need proper maintenance." He pulled out a handheld scanner and walked around the drive housing, nodding to himself. "Can you fix it?" Lily asked, her antenna twitching with anxiety. Jack smiled, and for a moment, the aliens saw what made humans so different. It wasn't just their physical strength or their resistance to radiation. It was their confidence in the face of danger. "The main problem is here," he said, pointing to a holographic display of the drive. "The radiation shielding has cracked, and the magnetic containment field is failing. That's why you're getting these radiation spikes. But that's impossible to fix while the drive is active," Iris protested. "The radiation levels are already at lethal levels for most species." Jack started unpacking his toolkit, revealing tools that looked almost primitive compared to the ship's advanced technology. "Most species, yeah. But humans, we're built different. Our bodies can handle short exposures to radiation that would kill others. Plus, this suit isn't just for show." He pulled out what looked like a simple wrench, and the aliens exchanged confused looks. Their tools were all electronic, designed for precision work from a safe distance. This human was planning to do manual repairs. "What we're going to do," Jack explained, laying out his tools in an organized pattern, "is bypass the damage section, realign the magnetic field generators, and then I can get in there to replace the cracked shielding." "Get in there?" Rose couldn't hide her shock. "You mean physically enter the drive housing?" "Sometimes the old ways are the best ways," Jack said with a shrug. "Your remote tools are great for routine maintenance, but in an emergency, nothing beats hands-on work." He began preparing his equipment, checking his suit's integrity and radiation shielding. The aliens watched in fascination as he moved with practiced efficiency, like someone who had done this many times before. "I'll need one of you to monitor the drive readings while I work," he said. "The rest should stay back in the shielded control room. This is going to get dangerous." Rose volunteered to stay, her curiosity about human engineering methods overcoming her fear. As Lily and Iris retreated to safety, she watched Jack make his final preparations. "Ever seen a human do repairs in high radiation before?" he asked, noticing her interest. Rose shook her head. "We were taught that such repairs were impossible without shutting down the drive completely." Jack grinned as he put his helmet back on. "Well then, you're about to see why they call us Deathworlders. And trust me, that's not always a bad thing." Jack stood before the quantum drive, his scanner showing readings that would make most safety inspectors faint. The radiation levels were now high enough to cook an unprotected person in minutes. Behind the safety barrier, Rose watched nervously as he examined the damaged drive housing. "The good news is, I can fix this," Jack said through his suit's comm system. "The bad news is, it's going to get worse before it gets better." He projected a 3D diagram of the quantum drive into the air, pointing out the damaged sections. The hologram showed angry red spots where radiation was leaking through the damaged shielding. To Rose's horror, the worst damage was deep inside the drive housing. "You can't possibly reach that," she said, her silvery skin pale with worry. "Even with your suit, the radiation would be too much." Jack chuckled. "You know what's funny? Back on Earth, we used to have people called nuclear divers. They would swim in pools of radioactive water to maintain reactors. Humans have been doing dangerous repairs like this for centuries." Rose's large purple eyes widened. "Your people willingly swam in radioactive water." "Someone had to do the job," Jack said simply. He began laying out his tools, each one specially hardened against radiation. "The thing about humans is, we don't just survive on our death world. We learned to master it." He pulled out what looked like a simple mechanical jack, the kind used to lift heavy objects. Rose was confused. Why not use anti-gravity lifts? "Electronics fail in high radiation," Jack explained. "Simple mechanical tools don't. That's why I brought these." He patted his toolkit. "Sometimes the old ways are the most reliable." The ship's computer announced another warning. The radiation levels had increased by 15%. They were running out of time. "Here's the plan," Jack said, pulling up more detailed schematics. "I need to realign the magnetic containment field first. That means manually adjusting these 4 generator nodes." He pointed to different spots around the drive. "Then, while the field is stabilized, I can replace the cracked shielding." Rose did some quick calculations in her head. That would mean at least 30 minutes of exposure to extreme radiation. 45, probably, Jack corrected. "Maybe an hour if things go wrong." "But that's..." Rose checked her readings again. "Even for a human, that's far beyond safe exposure limits." Jack nodded. "You're right. It's not safe. But it's possible, and right now, that's what matters." He started checking his suit's seals one final time. "My suit will handle most of it, and my body can deal with what gets through. We humans evolved under constant radiation from our sun, remember?" Rose watched as he made his final preparations. His calm confidence was unlike anything she had seen before. Most species in the galaxy sought to avoid danger. Humans seemed to have a different approach. They faced it head-on, armed with knowledge, tools, and sheer determination. "I'll need you to monitor these readings," Jack said, showing her specific measurements on the control panel. "If they go into the red zone, you need to let me know immediately. Can you do that?" Rose nodded, trying to match his professional demeanor. "What are the warning signs I should watch for? In case you..." She couldn't finish the sentence. "In case the radiation gets to me." Jack smiled behind his helmet. "Don't worry. I'll get dizzy first, then probably nauseous. If I start slurring my words or getting confused, that's when you hit the emergency protocols. But it won't come to that." He stepped toward the drive housing, tools ready. "One more thing," he said, turning back to Rose. "If any other ships offer to help, turn them away. Most species' suits aren't built for this kind of work. I don't want anyone else getting hurt trying to help." Rose watched as Jack approached the quantum drive. His heavy boots clanked against the metal floor, each step taking him closer to radiation levels that would kill most beings in seconds. Yet he moved with purpose, like a professional about to start just another day's work. "Beginning repairs now," Jack announced. "Let's show the galaxy what a Deathworlder engineer can do." The airlock hissed open to the vast emptiness of space. Jack floated out, his tether line connecting him to the Starweaver like a lifeline. The quantum drive's outer housing could only be accessed from outside the ship, where the radiation levels were even higher than inside. Rose watched through the ship's external cameras as Jack maneuvered in zero gravity. Unlike the awkward movements she was used to seeing from most species, he moved with surprising grace. His heavy-duty suit, which had looked clumsy inside the ship, now seemed perfectly designed for this dangerous work. Approaching the first access panel, Jack reported. The camera zoomed in on his work. Instead of using the standard magnetic boots that most engineers relied on, he used his tether line to anchor himself and twisted his body to get the perfect working angle. "How are you moving so easily?" Rose couldn't help asking. Most engineers she knew needed computer assistance to work in space. "Swimming," Jack answered, his hands already busy removing the panel. "Humans learned to swim long before we went to space. Zero-G movement is a lot like swimming underwater. Back on Earth, we train for spacewalks in giant pools." The panel came free, revealing the glowing inner workings of the quantum drive. The radiation sensors on Jack's suit screamed warnings, but he ignored them. His movements remained steady as he reached into the opening with his tools. "First magnetic generator exposed," he reported. "Starting realignment now." "Rose, what are the readings showing?" Rose checked her displays. "Radiation levels are at 400% of normal safety limits. The magnetic field is fluctuating at..." "Wait, it's starting to stabilize." Jack's hands moved with precision, using simple mechanical tools to adjust complex quantum technology. "These old drives were built to be repaired," he explained, his voice calm despite the danger. "The designers knew that sometimes you'd need to fix them the hard way." A burst of radiation suddenly flared from the drive. Rose gasped, but Jack barely moved. He simply adjusted his position, using his body to shield the sensitive components he was working on. "Jack, that radiation spike was..." "Just a hiccup," he interrupted. "My suit can handle it." Moving to the second generator now. Rose watched in amazement as Jack pushed off from the hull, using the momentum to glide perfectly to the next access point. His tether line curved gracefully as he moved, never once getting tangled. "You know what's funny?" Jack said, as he worked on the second generator. "Most species think humans are clumsy because we evolved in high gravity. But that same gravity made us really good at understanding momentum and balance." He demonstrated this by using the recoil from his wrench to spin himself into a better working position. Every movement seemed calculated, using physics in ways Rose had never considered. "Third generator coming up," Jack announced. His suit's radiation sensors were now showing dangerous levels, but his voice remained steady. "How's the magnetic field looking?" "Much better," Rose replied, studying the readings. "The containment is at 60% stability and improving. But Jack, your radiation exposure is..." "Still within human tolerance," he assured her, "though I might need a few days off after this." As he moved to the third generator, a piece of debris from the damaged drive housing floated past. Without missing a beat, Jack grabbed it with one hand. "Might need this later," he said, tucking it into a tool pouch. Rose shook her head in wonder. The more she watched him work, the more she understood why humans had earned their reputation as exceptional engineers. They didn't just solve problems. They seemed to thrive on finding solutions in the most challenging conditions. "Last generator coming up," Jack said, pushing off toward the final access point. His tether line stretched out behind him like a silver thread in the darkness of space. "Once this is aligned, we can work on the shielding." Rose looked at the radiation readings again, worry creasing her face. The levels were still climbing, and they hadn't even started the most dangerous part of the repair yet. But as she watched Jack work, she began to understand something about humans. What other species saw as dangerous limitations, they saw as challenges to overcome. "Ready for the final alignment," Jack announced. "Let's see what this Deathworlder can really do." With all 4 magnetic generators aligned, Jack moved to the most dangerous part of the repair. The cracked radiation shielding lay deep within the quantum drive's core. Even with the magnetic field stabilized, the radiation levels were lethal for most species. "Beginning core access now," Jack announced. His hands, steady despite hours of exposure, started removing the outer panels. Each piece had to be carefully detached to avoid damaging the sensitive equipment beneath. Rose watched from the control room, joined now by Lily and Iris, who couldn't stay away despite the danger. On their screens, the radiation readings were higher than anything they had ever seen. "Look at his heart rate," Lily whispered, pointing to Jack's bio readings. It's elevated, but still stable. How is that possible? Humans evolved to handle stress, Iris explained, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. Their bodies actually work better under pressure. Jack's voice came through the comm. I can see the damaged shielding now. It's worse than we thought. The camera feed showed a spider web of cracks across the critical radiation barrier. Deadly energy leaked through each break, filling the chamber with dangerous particles. Can it be repaired? Rose asked, dreading the answer. No, Jack replied, but his voice held no defeat. But I can replace it. I brought spare shielding plates, rated for twice the normal output. We just need to get the old one out first. The aliens watched in amazement as Jack began the delicate work of removing the damaged shielding. Each plate weighed as much as one of them, yet he handled them with surprising grace in the zero-gravity environment. On my world, Jack explained as he worked, keeping his voice steady despite the strain. We have these things called nuclear power plants. Been maintaining them for hundreds of years. This isn't so different, just more advanced technology. A sudden surge in the quantum drive sent a wave of radiation through the chamber. The aliens gasped, but Jack barely paused. He simply shifted his position, using his suit to shield the exposed components. Jack, your radiation exposure is reaching critical levels, Rose warned, her voice tight with concern. Still within tolerance, he responded, though his breathing had become heavier. Human cells can repair some radiation damage. We'll worry about that later. The first replacement plate went in smoothly. Jack's movements remained precise, each motion carefully planned to conserve energy and minimize exposure time. The aliens noticed how he used simple mechanical principles, leverage, momentum, and inertia, to move the heavy components. You know what's interesting? Jack said as he secured the second plate. Most species develop technology to avoid doing dangerous repairs like this. Humans, we develop technology to help us do them better. The third plate proved challenging. The mounting brackets had been warped by the radiation, making it difficult to attach properly. Jack studied the problem for a moment, then pulled out the piece of debris he had caught earlier during the spacewalk. Sometimes you need to improvise, he said, using the debris as a makeshift tool to bend the brackets back into shape. The aliens exchanged looks of surprise. They would never have thought to repurpose damaged parts this way. As Jack worked on the final plate, his suit's radiation alarm began beeping more urgently. His movements had slowed slightly, but his determination never wavered. Almost there, he said, his voice showing the first signs of strain. Rose, how are the readings looking? Rose checked the displays. The quantum drive is stabilizing. Radiation levels are dropping wherever you've replaced the shielding. But Jack, your exposure levels will make for some interesting medical readings, he finished with a slight laugh. But the job's almost done. One more plate. The aliens watched in tense silence as Jack positioned the final piece of shielding. His hands, though slightly shaky now, remained skilled enough to make the precise adjustments needed. With a final turn of his wrench, the plate locked into place. Shielding replacement complete, Jack announced. Rose, run a full diagnostic. Let's see if this Deathworlder's work meets galactic standards. The aliens held their breath as the computer began its analysis. They had just witnessed something they had been taught was impossible, and a human had made it look almost routine. Just as Jack finished securing the last radiation shield, the ship's emergency alarm blared to life. Red warning lights flashed across every screen in the control room. Incoming solar flare detected. Rose shouted into the comm. Massive radiation wave approaching. Jack, you need to get back inside now. But Jack didn't move toward the airlock. Instead, he studied the quantum drive readings on his suit's display. We can't leave yet. The new shielding needs final calibration, or the drive could fail when the flare hits. The three alien engineers stared at their screens in horror. The approaching solar flare was massive, carrying enough radiation to overwhelm even the ship's main shields. For someone outside the ship, exposed to space, it would be devastating. "Jack, please," Lily pleaded. "The radiation will be lethal, even for a human. If this drive fails, everyone on this ship dies," Jack replied calmly. His hands were already moving over the calibration controls. "How long until the flare hits?" 3 minutes, Eris reported, her translucent skin showing her racing pulse. "The ship's main shields are powering up, but you'll be outside their protection." Jack worked faster, his movements still precise despite the growing danger. "My suit can handle it. Humans built these suits to work in the worst conditions. Trust me." The aliens watched their sensors as the wall of radiation approached. It was like watching a tsunami of invisible death rolling toward them through space. The ship's computer counted down the seconds, each moment bringing the danger closer. 2 minutes to impact, Rose announced, her voice shaking. "Jack, at least let us try to extend the shield bubble." "No time," Jack interrupted. "Need all power for the main shields and drive calibration. Almost done here." He was working on the final calibration sequence when the first wave of radiation hit. His suit's sensors screamed warnings, but Jack remained focused on his task. The aliens could see his vital signs spiking on their monitors: elevated heart rate, rising body temperature, increasing radiation exposure. 1 minute to main flare impact, Iris called out. "Jack, your suit's radiation shielding is failing." "Just need 30 more seconds," Jack grunted. They could hear the strain in his voice now, but his hands never stopped moving. "The drive has to be perfectly calibrated, or we'll lose containment when the main flare hits." The radiation levels around him were now higher than anything the aliens had ever recorded. Jack's suit was absorbing most of it, but enough was getting through to cause serious damage. Yet he kept working, using his own body to shield the sensitive calibration equipment. "Calibration at 95%, Jack reported. His voice was rough, but he didn't slow down. "Come on, you beautiful piece of engineering, work with me here." 20 seconds to main flare impact. The aliens watched in amazement as Jack made the final adjustments. His suit's external cameras showed his hands moving steadily despite the deadly radiation bombarding him. Where most species would have been incapacitated, this human continued working. "Calibration complete," Jack announced. "Drive containment is stable. Rose, power up the quantum core." 10 seconds to impact. Jack turned and began moving toward the airlock, but it was clear he wouldn't make it in time. The main radiation wave was approaching too fast. "Jack, what can we do?" Rose asked desperately. "Nothing," he said, his voice surprisingly calm. "Just keep the drive running. My suit will protect me. Humans don't give up easily, remember." The solar flare hit with full force just as Jack reached the outer hull. The aliens watched in horror as their sensors briefly overloaded from the massive radiation spike. For several terrifying seconds, all their external cameras went dark. When the sensors finally cleared, they expected the worst. But there was Jack, still clinging to the hull, his suit scorched but intact. He had positioned himself in the shadow of the ship's hull, using centuries of human knowledge about radiation shielding to survive. "Jack," Rose called out anxiously. "Jack, can you hear me?" There was a moment of static. Then a weak chuckle came through the comm. "Still here. Told you these human suits were built tough. Now how about opening that airlock? I could really use a coffee." The aliens stared at their screens in disbelief. Once again, they had underestimated just how far a human would go to complete a job, and just how much punishment a Deathworlder could survive. The medical bay of the Starweaver was designed to treat a variety of species, but it had never hosted a human before. Jack sat on a reinforced bed, calmly drinking his third cup of coffee while the ship's medical scanner tried to make sense of his physiology. "Your body is already repairing the radiation damage," Iris said, studying the readings with fascination. "I've never seen anything like it. Most species would be dead or dying, but you're just Tired. Jack shrugged, wincing slightly at the movement. Human bodies are good at healing. Give me a few days of rest and some decent food, and I'll be fine. He took another sip of coffee. Though I might need to update my radiation exposure badge when I get back to the station. Rose entered the medical bay, carrying a datapad. The quantum drive diagnostics are complete, she announced. It's not only fixed, it's running better than before. How did you improve it while doing emergency repairs? Simple mechanical principles, Jack explained. Sometimes the best solutions are the oldest ones. I noticed your drive was working harder than it needed to because of some inefficient energy flows. The new shielding configuration helps direct that energy better. Lily, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke up. The Galactic Engineering Council wants to talk to you. They say what you did was impossible. They want to know how a primitive Deathworlder managed to repair a quantum drive during a solar flare. Jack laughed, then grimaced as his sore muscles protested. Primitive? Maybe. But humans learned long ago that the universe doesn't care about elegant solutions. Sometimes you need to get your hands dirty and just keep working until the job is done. The ship's captain arrived, her silvery uniform gleaming under the medical bay lights. Engineer Jack, she said formally. The council has authorized me to offer you a permanent position as our ship's chief engineer. They believe your unique capabilities would be valuable to us. Jack raised an eyebrow. You mean they want to study how a human engineer works? Yes, the captain admitted honestly. But we also need someone who can handle repairs that other species cannot. Your methods may be unconventional, but they are undeniably effective. Rose stepped forward. I would be honored to work with and learn from you, she said. Today you showed us that sometimes the best technology isn't the most advanced. It's the most reliable. Jack looked around the medical bay and at the aliens who had watched him work. Where there had once been fear and doubt about the dangerous Deathworlder, he now saw respect and curiosity. You know, he said thoughtfully, humans have a saying. The best tool for the job isn't always the newest one. We learned that lesson the hard way, living on our Deathworld. Sometimes the simple solution is the best one. He stood up, still a bit shaky but determined to stand on his own. I accept the position, but on one condition. We teach each other. You show me your advanced technology, and I'll show you how humans approach problems. Together, we might discover that primitive and advanced aren't as different as everyone thinks. The captain nodded in agreement. The council will be pleased, and perhaps it's time the galaxy learned that being from a Deathworld isn't a disadvantage. It's just a different kind of strength. As the others left the medical bay, Rose lingered behind. Jack, she said quietly, thank you. Not just for saving the ship, but for showing us that sometimes the most impressive technology isn't a quantum computer or a radiation shield. Oh, Jack smiled. And what is it? The human mind, she replied. Your ability to keep working, to adapt, to survive. That's more advanced than any tool we've created. Jack finished his coffee and stood up straighter. Well then, Chief Assistant Engineer Rose, shall we go check on our quantum drive? I have some ideas about improving the efficiency even further. As they walked toward engineering, the Starweaver's engines hummed with perfect harmony. In the ship's log, a new entry was made. Ship's engineer position filled. Species, human, Deathworlder. Note, highly recommended for complex repairs. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the best engineers come from the most challenging worlds, and that human ingenuity could solve problems that advanced technology couldn't touch.